There was only one pedal that I could keep or use, or you pare things back down to like the very bare essentials. The HX Stomp, I think, could be a thing that could be the only thing I need.
This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
FM3 from Fractal, I think I'd also say that would be one thing that I could be the only thing that I need in terms of like a pedal type thing. I guess some of you guys are maybe going to think that this doesn't really count as a pedal. Certainly the FM3, closer to $1,000 or whatever. I use the HX Stomp as this is my kind of favourite pedal because it's priced like a couple of boutique sort of drive pedals or one expensive reverb pedal or whatever, and yet you can actually just gig with this thing. So I count it as a pedal, especially when they came out with the HX1, which to me is like sort of an even pared down HX Stomp experience. I noticed that it had ended up on Mark Lettieri's board, which I thought was really cool. But I thought I wanted to talk to you today in this video about some of the ways that I'm using the HX Stomp in 2024 and going into 2025. The way one is that on acoustic gigs, I just use this instead of, I used to use like an LR Baggs Power DI. Now I use this, which has some EQ stuff on it, a bit of reverb, but also basically I've set it up to sort of match my acoustic guitar to a condenser recorded acoustic. The other cool thing about this is that you've got a really powerful set of EQ shaping stuff. So often with an acoustic guitar, it's kind of tricky to get stuff, sounding A, good, but also B, not feeding back like crazy. So this is quite helpful for that, as well as having some really good reverbs in there. And I used a retro reel on the acoustic guitar to sort of soften some of the higher end that comes out of a piezo pickup. So that's way one. So every acoustic gig that I've done this year, I've gone through an HX Stomp. So that's been really valuable. So as like an acoustic job, it's great for that. The other thing is on my main pedal board, I've got an HX Stomp as like a hybrid setup. So I have 2 or 3 drive pedals that go into the front of an HX Stomp. And then in the HX Stomp, it splits off before the amp to go into a real amp on stage, if I'm lucky enough to get to gig with a real amp that day. So the real amp gets the drives, and there's like laser and reverb in front of the amp and cab in the HX Stomp as well. And then the HX Stomp, after the split into an amp and cab, and I think I used a Grammatico GSG 100, shout out to John Grammatico, great amps made in Nashville. And then that's kind of set as a clean pedal platform, and then that goes through front of house to the desk, so that's what folks hear out of front of house and in their ears, as well as, you know, my amp on stage. So that's the other way I've been using it. So I have 2 delays that I switch between for the HX Stomp, and then I've got the tuner on the HX Stomp as well. Really useful for that, and I don't really see that changing from my pedal board, if I'm honest with you. Other elements I'm experimenting with all the time and changing things up, but that element, I think I'm really happy with that. In particular this year as well, I compared the HX Stomp's Grammatico GSG to Universal Audio Enigmatic, and I thought the HX Stomp stood up really well in that, and this has been the case with pretty much anything that I've thrown at it, like a Friedman IRX. I felt like the HX Stomp stood up really well with that as well, and that's got real tubes in it and stuff, so impressive from that point of view. The other thing that this has going for it, especially for the price when you think about it, is that any model that's in the most expensive Line 6 Helix floor trickles down to the HX Stomp as well. So you've got, at this point, a really high count of great amps in there. You know, they just added a Bogner Ecstasy, they just added a Fender Super Reverb, they just added an EVH 5150. You've got a Grammatico GSG 100 from a couple of updates ago. There's so much great stuff in there. You've got a Fender Bassman Silverface from, like, kind of pretty close to a Blackface Bassman. That's in there. These amps sound really good. There's matchless stuff in there. I really like it for the amp models especially. So that's kind of another way that I would use it personally. It's like using this as just the thing where you've got your whole chains. And if that's the thing, like Eric Clean, Eric Lead 2023, those are presets that you hear me using all the time. And that's really a really key point for me, is that Helix Native enables me to get these tones without having to use the hardware, which actually has been a revelation for me for about the last sort of year, 2 years, where frankly I just have a guitar cable plugged into my audio interface and I don't even have to worry about some of this stuff, and it's been really useful. So having a piece of hardware that actually properly speaks to, and presets can be passed between Helix Native and here, that is still a huge thing, even in 2024 going into 2025. That Line 6 have figured out that quite a lot of the other companies don't have an answer to. Like, there isn't a VST version of Fractal stuff. There isn't a VST version of Quad Cortex stuff. Yes, they're porting some plugins at the moment, and presets I think now you can pass between, but there's not like an all-in-one solution part to that. Big deal. And then one other thing that I'll play you out with, I'm using an expression pedal with the HX Stomp to do some kind of more creative ambient stuff. And I imagine if you were playing like in a church or doing solo gigs, this could be a really useful thing, or just practicing. But once you pair this with an expression pedal, here I just put together this preset that I'm calling Nashville Freeze. It will go into my expression freeze presets folder. There are a few folders now, but that's kind of the one on Gumroad. If you're looking for these freeze presets, you'll need an expression pedal, and basically you play your chord, put the expression down kind of softly shortly after, and it kind of blends into this infinite freezing thing. Like a really clever thing. For people that are looking for something to go on their pedal boards, I think you get a tiny bit of the HX Stomp experience with the HX1, but for me what really works great with the Helix HX Stomp and the higher up models in HX Effect as well, to be fair, is when you start to stack things, you know, putting together combinations of delay and reverb, using delays that are then pitched up and that sort of stuff, like with this freeze preset. That's where I think some of the power is. It remains my favourite pedal going into 2025. I don't know if at some point Line 6 are going to supersede this with anything, but I think it's going to remain very good value for a while, I think. The two downsides for me is that these encoders seem to sort of sometimes miss a beat, as I think they kind of, I don't know, they don't seem super robust over my years of using them. And then the other thing is the power supply, which you need something like 1 amp, and it's not the right, you know, you need a special lead for it. I think you can get a 1 spot for that if you wanted. But that's the other kind of downside. So it's not always the super easiest thing to mount onto a pedal board, but Harley Benton do make a power supply, which I'll link in the description, which has an output specifically for the HX Stomp and the lead that you need. So let me know your favourite pedals, I think maybe of all time, in the comments, and if you want to email me things that I desperately need to check out. I've just seen this new Plethora from TC Electronics. I'm kind of keen to check out one of the Plethora units. Plethora? How do you actually say it? Plethora. It's Plethora, isn't it? Anyway, that's the HX Stomp. If you want my presets, jump into the Gumroad folder. But I just wanted to give that some praise again, because of all of the pieces of gear that I've used basically on most gigs, except for ones where I was using the FM9 Turbo, the Helix HX Stomp, Helix Native, has been with me in pretty much every single video. I don't know if you know that. A lot of you might, but yeah, if you're ever wondering like what my tones are, and it's not a specific video about a pedal or amp or whatever, it's most likely an HX Stomp or latterly Helix Native.